Assalamualaikum, welcome to Millennium TV Headline News. This is Isha Jahan with the top stories. Obama's troops boost in Syria marks high-risk shift. White House to ramp up pressure on North Korea. US sends jets to deter Russian aggression. Tensions flare at Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque. Survivors' relatives member Chernobyl victims. Snakes weather add to misery for Idomeni migrants. Canadian hostess beheaded in the Philippines. Obama weekly address building a fairer and more effective criminal justice system. Viewers, now the detail. Media said President Obama's plan to send 250 more U.S. troops to Syria marks a risky commitment by the U.S. to train local fighters for assault on the Islamic State stronghold in Raqqa.
Up to 250 additional U.S. personnel.
President Obama's high-stakes plan to send 250 more U.S. troops into Syria marks a pivotal shift in the U.S.-led campaign to defeat Islamic State. The six-fold increase comes after a key victory over ISIS, orchestrated by 50 U.S. advisors already on the ground.
There was a turning point about a month ago in a city called Shadadi in Syria, where the Islamic State forces had really beefed up to try to defend it, and they were quickly overrun with the help of the American advisors. And at that point, there was a proposal made to President Obama to increase the number of special forces in Syria.
After the Shadadi victory, Strobel says local militias vetted by the U.S. are eager to join the fight.
There were a lot of Arab fighters who were sort of sitting on the fence, and they saw that the good guys, so to speak, won in Shadadi, and they now want to join with them, but they need training and equipment. That's why they're sending in the 250 additional special forces. One of Islamic State's main strongholds is the city of Raqqa, and the strongest force nearby is the Kurds, but Raqqa is a Sunni Arab city, and the Kurds cannot probably take that city away from Islamic State, so you need a larger Arab force that would eventually take Raqqa, one of the capitals of Islamic State.
The special forces, 300 in all, will be there to advise, not to fight, but no one is ruling it out.
U.S. Special Operations Forces are not involved in combat per se. They will help call in airstrikes from American and Allied air power overhead, but they're going to be close to the battle, and it's not without risk to the American soldiers.
The program comes after the outright failure of Obama's plan to train and equip fighters outside Syria, with only a small handful ever joining the battle.
The White House says it plans to continue to ramp up the pressure on Pyongyang to curb its nuclear activities.
Last several months, we've seen them engage in a series of actions that are in direct contradiction to UN Security Council resolutions. We've expressed our strong concern about those provocative actions. We have marshaled the international community to respond accordingly. And earlier this year, there was a response from the United Nations that actually put in place the farthest reaching sanctions against North Korea that targeted specific elements of their economy, such as it is, that we know are used to fund these illicit activities. So we're going to continue to ramp up the pressure on the North Korean regime. We're going to continue to work closely with the Chinese government that has more influence with the North Korean government than any other country in the world. And we're going to continue to make clear that the path that North Korea must choose to rejoin the international community is one that involves them committing to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula and come into compliance with their international obligations.
Two highly advanced U.S. F-22 fighters fly to the Black Sea for the first time since Washington beefed up military support for NATO's Eastern European allies who say they face aggression from Russia.
In the air above Europe, fighter jets so advanced that the US has banned them from being sold abroad. F-22 Raptor jets courtesy of the US Air Force on their way from Britain to the Black Sea. It's their first time in Eastern Europe since President Obama promised to beef up NATO's defences there. And while crew on the refuelling plane might have had more exciting missions, this is a show of force aimed at an old Cold War foe. Correspondent flew with them to the base in Romania.
This is part of a broader European deployment. This is the biggest number of F-22 Raptor jets that the US have ever brought over to Europe. And they're making these short hop trips, these day trips, to show that they can. This is an area where Russia has shown aggression, and presumably the US Air Force wants to try and stamp that out.
The F-22s are almost impossible to detect on radar. The US military says they want to keep their so-called adversary guessing. That won't go down well with Russia, which has already warned that NATO's build-up is adding fuel to the flames. Intimidation for sailing a vessel close to their borders. Relations have been tense since Russia annexed Crimea in 2014. And as both sides boost their military presence in Eastern Europe, this is unlikely to be the last display of military might.
Scuffles break out between Palestinians and Israeli security forces outside Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque after several Israelis violated visitation rules.
The clashes broke out after a group of Israelis violated visitation rules here at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. Israeli security forces had to push back angry Muslim worshippers after 9 Jewish visitors lay on the ground in what seemed to be an attempt to pray, an act forbidden for Jews at the compound. Israeli access to the compound has been a major source of tensions with Palestinians and one of the driving factors behind a 6-month surge in violence in the region. That surge has killed 28 Israelis, 2 U.S. citizens, and 191 Palestinians, 130 of whom Israel says were attackers in the streets. So far, there's no sign of the Al-Aqsa dispute or the violence it has produced ending anytime soon.
30 years later, Ukrainians in Slavuj, a town where many were permanently relocated to, pay tribute to the victims of the worst nuclear disaster in history. It is 30 years since the worst nuclear disaster in history. Survivors and relatives remember the dead. Many were relocated here after the catastrophe. Chernobyl nuclear plant engineer at the time of disaster, Vasil Markin, saying,
"Это трагедия до конца жизни не будет. Я все равно ее не могу забыть. Да никто не забудет, который прошел с первого дня аварии. Я, например, с первого дня аварии, как с 26-го начал.
On April 26, 1986, a nuclear reactor in Chernobyl exploded. The impact was devastating and long-lasting. Countless numbers died due to radiation exposure.
It is about 170 times.
Gale force winds, cold temperatures and snakes worsen the living condition for migrants stuck in Greece's makeshift border camp at Idomeni. Strong winds, cold temperature and snakes are worsening the living conditions for thousands of migrants stuck in Greece's makeshift border camp at Idomeni. Following 2 days of heavy rainfall, gale force winds swept through the overcrowded camp on Tuesday, tearing and toppling tents. Temperature dropped to 15 degrees Celsius overnight. Aid organizations have repeatedly said the living conditions at the sprawling city are appalling. A lack of hygiene facilities, storage in food and medicine make it tough for the camp's residents and especially for the most vulnerable women and children. Along with the decline in weather conditions, migrants have also had to brave snakes, who after waking from their winter hibernation are appearing more frequently inside the camp. Yes, we have seen some snakes. For the moment, it's more or less under control, but we are trying to put in place some measures to diminish the population of the snakes in the camp, said MSF coordinator at Idomeni, Emmanuel Massert.
So yes, we've seen two days of heavy rains, and then 2 days really windy. So we have in the last 2 days of rain, we have been distributing a lot of tents because a lot of tents have been broken, and today with the wind, we have seeing more tents being broken during the day. So it is still really challenging. We have seen some snakes. For the moment, it's more or less under control, but yes, we are trying to put in place some measures to diminish the population of the snakes in the camp.
Philippine authorities find the severed head of a Canadian hostage kidnapped last year by the radical Muslim group Abu Sayyaf. As Manuel Mugato reports from Manila, the lives of the remaining hostages could be in grave danger in the hands of a group that puts money before ideology.
A deadline passed at the cost of a human life. Canadian John Ridsdale, seen speaking in this video from last year, brutally executed by Islamic militants in the Philippines. The army finding his severed head on a remote island on Monday, 5 hours after the end of a ransom deadline set by Abu Sayyaf, a radical group linked to Al-Qaeda. Ridsdale was kidnapped from an upscale resort in the Philippines last September, along with another Canadian man, a Norwegian and a local woman. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has sent public condolences to Ridsdale's family. This message coming from the sidelines of a cabinet meeting in Alberta.
This was an act of cold-blooded murder, and responsibility rests squarely with the terrorist group who took him hostage.
Trudeau wouldn't say whether his government tried to negotiate for Ridsdale's release or if they plan to do the same for the other Canadian captive, Robert Hall. One thing seems apparent though, the captors are more interested in making money than making a religious statement.
In this week's address, the President discussed his continued efforts to build a fairer and more equitable criminal justice system.
Hello, everybody. Today, there are some 2.2 million people behind bars in America. Millions more are on parole or probation. All told, we spend $80 billion taxpayer dollars each year to keep people locked up. Many are serving unnecessarily long sentences for nonviolent crimes. Almost 60% have mental health problems. Almost 70% were regular drug users. And as a whole, our prison population is disproportionately Black and Latino. Now, plenty of people should be behind bars. But the reason we have so many more people in prison than any other developed country is not because we have more criminals. It's because we have criminal justice policies, including unfair sentencing laws, that need to be reformed. We know that simply locking people up doesn't make communities safer. It doesn't deal with the conditions that led people to criminal activity in the first place, or to return to prison later. After all, there's evidence that a 10% increase in the high school graduation rate leads to a nearly 10% decrease in arrest rates. A 10% wage increase for men without a college degree lowers crime by as much as 20%. And a growing body of research suggests that the longer people stay in jail, the more likely they are to commit another crime once they get out. Here's why this matters. Every year, more than 600,000 people are released from prison. We need to ensure that they're prepared to re-enter society and become productive, contributing members of their families and communities, and maybe even role models. That's why we've been working to make our criminal justice system smarter, fairer, less expensive, and more effective. This week, the Department of Justice will highlight how strong re-entry programs can make communities safer. My administration will announce new actions that will build on the progress we've already made. We'll release more details about how we are taking steps to ensure that applicants with a criminal history have a fair shot to compete for a federal job. We're issuing a new report that details the economic costs of our high rates of incarceration. And we're calling on businesses to commit to hiring returning citizens who have earned a second chance. These are just a few of the steps we're taking, but there's much more to do. Disrupting the pipeline from underfunded schools to overcrowded jails, addressing the disparities in the application of criminal justice, from arrest rates to sentencing to incarceration, investing in alternatives to prison, like drug courts and mental health treatment, helping those who have served their time get the support they need to become productive members of society. Good people from both sides of the aisle and across all sectors are coming together on this issue, from businesses that are changing their hiring practices to law enforcement that's improving community policing. We're seeing change. Now we need a Congress that's willing to send a bipartisan criminal justice reform bill to my desk. This isn't just about what makes economic and practical sense. It's about making sure that we live up to our ideals as a nation. Thanks, and have a great weekend.
Viewers, let's have a look at Millennium TV Headline News Recap. Obama's troops boost in Syria marks high-risk shift. White House to ramp up pressure on North Korea. US sends jets to deter Russian aggression. Tensions flare at Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque. Survivors' relatives remember Chernobyl victims. Snakes weather add to misery for Idomeni migrants. Canadian hostess beheaded in the Philippines. Obama weekly address building a fairer and more effective criminal justice system. You are up to date with the top stories so far here on Millennium TV, and don't forget to log into www.millenniumtv.net. Thank you and stay with Millennium TV. Allah Hafiz.